Okay. Good afternoon and welcome back. I hope that you had a good weekend. We're getting pretty close to the end here. This is only one of 4 full weeks left in the term. Thank you for getting in your small group assessments. I'd imagine maybe some of you are tired from burning midnight oil, but I do appreciate you getting that in. If you're not able to get that in due to an extension, I look forward to reading it. If you've not been able to get it in yet, just remember for everybody else, it's -5% for each day it's late. So try to get it in as soon as you can. My goal is to have them graded for you by the end of this week, so that you know what to expect and how you're doing in this class as we go forward for the next assignment. So I do want to take some time today to talk about the last major assignment for this course that has 2 parts, which is the small group observation. So we'll take some time to talk about that, and then we'll dive into this week, in which we'll be talking about leadership and what it means to be a good leader and manager in a group setting. So last class, we talked about Robert's Rules of Order, how we're able to run and structure meetings effectively. So Robert's Rules of Order was something we acted out last week when I had us play out parliamentary procedure to get everybody chocolate for the month of February. This is a really good thing to know when it comes to group meetings because it's used by a whole lot of organizations and groups. So if you haven't already encountered Robert's Rules, you likely will in the future. And I will tell you that I have been involved in so many groups that do not know how to use this structure properly, that coming in as somebody with that experience and somebody who's able to speak to the process will make you very popular very quickly. So I encourage you to continue to brush up on that so that you have a better understanding of how this functions in a group setting. We talked about some of these key ideas in parliamentary procedure, right? How you reach a quorum, how you have a motion that is seconded, debated, and then voted upon. And this structure makes for a very efficient and well-organized way of discussing and dealing with issues that come up in group settings. So I want to take some time to give you a sense of what to expect in the small group observation and to help you in some of the early brainstorming for this assignment. And then we'll start to talk about some fundamentals in leadership. So to get us started, we have the small group observation essay and presentation. So 2 parts of this last assignment. And while these aren't for a few weeks, I do like to put them on your radar soon so that you have plenty of time to think this over, to start to plan, and to start to get this assignment ready to go. So the essay portion of this assignment is going to be due on March 17th by 11:59. And then there'll be an in-class presentation, and we will have that split into 3 days. So it'll either be on March 13th, 15th, or 17th. And I'll be sending out an availability form later that you'll be able to complete to indicate your preferences or days that you will not be able to attend. So to give you a sense of what to look for out of this assignment, so there is the written essay portion. And if you go to Canvas, that shows up here, small group observation essay. So we've spent some time this quarter where you've reflected on a group that you are or have been involved in. You've taken some time to think about your own participation in this class. And the last thing they'll be asking you to do is to observe a small group that you are not a member of and attend at least one of their meetings. Right? So I've had a lot of different clubs and activities that people have done. Some people have done, for instance, the Agripreneur Club, the Philosophy Club. I had one person who went to a faculty senate meeting. There is a whole range of different types of clubs, activities, organizations, and groups that you can go to. EOU is a really easy place to start, but they don't have to be limited to EOU, right? So what I want you to do is to receive permission, right? You either should be picking a group meeting that's open to the public or one where you've reached out in advance. And yes, you can attend. And what I want you to do is attend a meeting that's either face-to-face or remote, but it should be synchronous. In other words, it should not be a meeting that happened a year ago that you're just watching a video of. It should be a meeting that is happening while you're there. And this meeting should be at least a half hour long so that you have a good amount of material that you can draw from and discuss for this presentation. Clubs and activities on campus are a great starting point. In fact, if you're trying to think about ideas, one of the best things that you can do is the minute you walk out of this classroom, just take a look at some of the posters that are on the wall on the other side about a lot of the clubs and groups we have on campus that you might be able to attend. So once you've done that, I encourage you to plan out which group you intend to meet. You might reach out to a friend or somebody that you know, like a dorm roommate who is also involved in a group, and use that opportunity to see if you can go to one of their meetings as well. What I really encourage you to do, though, is to make sure that you get that observation done as soon as possible. Ideally, like a week or so in advance of your actual presentation. The reason for that is that if you wait, then you're not going to have as much time to report on and discuss the actual issue that you're talking about. So, for instance, this is not an assignment that's easy to procrastinate on. If you wait and you try to do it the night before, you won't have a group to observe for that one. So I encourage you to think about a group that you can meet with, set up a meeting with in the next few weeks. And that way, if they cancel, because a lot of group meetings will be canceled or rescheduled, you might have a backup option or two that you could go to as well. In other words, you're responsible for making sure you can go to a group meeting. If you pick a group that cancels, that reschedules, or you're not able to attend, right, make sure that you have a backup option that you can pick if you're not able to go to that. Once you've done that and picked your group and completed that part, I'll be asking you to do a 2-page response. Again, it can be over 2 pages if you'd like, but that's the general minimum. What I'll be asking you to do is to describe the group that you chose to observe. Who was the group? When did they meet? What was going on? So talk a little bit about this group meeting, how this group meeting was organized and ran. So that'll draw from the things that we've discussed last week about group meetings and how meetings are structured. Second of all, what did you notice about the leadership and the roles of group members? We'll be talking about leadership and roles a lot this week and next week. That'll give you some additional context there. And then lastly, I'll ask you to think about the effectiveness. Did this meeting go well? Did it not go well? I'll be asking you to apply and use these ideas we've talked about in the class as a way of assessing this group meeting that you observed to determine what about it did or didn't go so well, right? So you'll be turning in the written essay component by March 17th. And then the presentation days are the 13th, 15th, and the 17th. Again, I'll be sending out an availability form for you to indicate when you can and cannot attend. I will be asking you to present face-to-face if you can, unless there's an emergency or other conflict. This will be a 5 to 6 minute presentation, so I encourage you to practice, time yourself to get in that range. I do encourage you and ask that you include some type of visual aid. For instance, you might include some slides or Prezi, or you might include an image from this organization or group that you're drawing from. This is not a public speaking class. I'm not grading the quality of your delivery, but I do ask that you rehearse, that you practice and prepare. And I do still take attendance on other days, so I ask that you come in ready to listen to and learn from other students. Outside of an emergency or conflict, please make sure that you're there on the day to attend. And then your presentation should talk a little bit about what the meeting was that you observed, what happened during the meeting, and what you learned from that meeting. And I'll be posting the full rubric that has a breakdown of how I'll be grading those later this week. Any questions about either the essay or the presentation portion of the small group observation? Great. Questions do come up, let me know. You're welcome to reach out if you have an edge case, if you're not sure if this would be a good group to observe that would count for this assignment, or if you're hitting a blank, you have no idea which groups you want to observe, reach out to me and I'd be happy to give you some ideas. These are always a lot of fun. They're a great way to round out the course. And so I look forward to hearing and seeing what you end up observing. So this week, we're talking about leadership in groups. And to get us started in thinking about group leadership, I'd like you to take some time to think about a leader that you've encountered in your life that especially stands out to you. Maybe this is somebody in your family, maybe this is a boss or supervisor, maybe this is a team captain or leader of a group that you've been a part of, maybe it's a coach, and I want you to think a little bit about what makes that person a good leader. Once you've done that, I want you to think about if you've had to take on a leadership role in a group before, what was that like? And if you haven't taken on a leadership role, what are some concerns that you might have about being a leader? So this is part one of your attendance. I'll ask you to take a few minutes, jot down your thoughts, and then I'll ask us to go around and share. You have a few more minutes here. go ahead and finish your current thought or idea. And I'd like us to go around the room. And when we get to you, I'd like you to share, first of all, who was the leader you selected and what made them a good leader in your eyes? And second of all, have you had to take on a leadership role before? If you have, what was that like? And if you haven't, what are some concerns that you have about being a leader? So let's start over here on the second.
All right, first of all, I picked my son Aaron because he owns a business and I just see right. So yeah, you know, basically and know what the business needs to succeed. Ranching is quite authoritarian because there's really no room for debate in that kind of work. Sure. And then for part two, I really take leadership roles. I try to avoid them to the extent possible. Sure. And, basically, it's usually like, how do I convince people to do things my way, and how do I manage the obligations, responsibilities of it? Because usually it's a less formal system. If I'm a leadership role, you know, like a group assignments or something.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I chose the team lead I had when I worked at Safeway. She didn't manage to care about all the employees and like keep them almost with a friend, while at the same time also managed to make sure everything got done that we needed to get done. I have taken on these roles multiple times in my life. I actually had to fill in when my team lead was gone at Safeway, and so I can do like training and do inventory and make sure that everything is getting done as well, like she would.
Thanks for sharing. Jake.
So I chose my dad because he's not only a father, but he's also a coach and a river guide, and he's just naturally good at leading. And what makes him a good leader is that he's like very smart and empathetic. So he listens to all like his well, they're not teammates, but they're his athletes,
Sure.
and takes time to do things that are morally correct or like what everybody thinks is right. And like father, like daughter, I've taken on lots of leadership roles throughout my life, but I'd say that like one of the ones that's pretty big and significant to me is guiding. It takes a lot out of you. You're exhausted by the end of the day, but you feel good about what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
The leader that I chose was my high school senior year basketball coach. I feel like he was a good leader because of his experience with the game, both as a coach and a player. And he would often try to help everyone. I believe all coaches should, but he likes helping those, especially who don't have a refined set of skills. So he tries to help out everyone, so we get all of them as a team. I don't think I've ever had a official membership role. I mean, leadership role. I don't know if you count like friend groups.
Sure. I mean, it's a group, right?
Back home, I was like one of the first ones to have a car, so they would often come to me and ask, when are we doing this? What are we doing? So the thing that stresses me the most is just that thought in my head, like if something does go wrong because I was moved on as a leader, it's my fault. Yeah.
Sure, sure. And it's a concern that's shared by a lot of people. Thanks for bringing that up. Go for it. Sorry. Go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I chose a volleyball coach for a leader, and she's just really good at keeping us all enthusiastic about the game, and she takes like opinions from all of us to come together as a whole. She's not very authoritarian. She does keep us in check and keep us informed, but she also it's more like a family and she more treats us as like colleagues, kind of not like we're her players. So we just come together to make decisions. That's super awesome.
Mhm.
And I'm the team captain for my volleyball team. That was my leadership role that I chose. And I really like it. It keeps me more engaged, I
Mhm.
feel like. I get to take more responsibility for what the team does and like how it works and more the logistics of it. So I think that is a super fun position.
Absolutely. And Nick,
I would say, old coach of mine, and the reason that was so great was, everyone spend is authentic, so when you see not trying to someone else,
Mhm.
just himself. And then the story choices, which is like the brings character. And for two, I would say, I think that leadership was important, like my project. And some consumers I have not really needed to communicate well with them.
absolutely. Yeah. Good communication is crucially important for leaders, for sure.
I chose my high school football coach,
Mhm.
and not because, I mean, he was an excellent coach on the football field, but outside of that, he was also just a really good role model to look up to. He really taught me and my teammates a lot of good life lessons about how to be a man, and he went through a lot of hard challenges throughout the years that he was my coach, and despite all that, he always showed up every day for us and was there for us when we needed him. And so I really grew to like respect and admire him for that. I've been the leader for a few years on football teams as team captains and things like that. Given some cheesy halftime speeches before, but stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's fun as a way of bringing people together.
Right. So I chose my basketball coach and she was a good leader because she focused on like relationship building and she was very confident and persistent. And then I had to be the captain of my basketball team, which meant I had to lead the team and I was encouraging all of the core values our team should have.
Yeah. That's a great attitude to have, right? Modeling the core values or beliefs that the group has, being an example of that, right? Leading by example, something a lot of folks mentioned in my other class too.
I chose my freshman year captain, my soccer captain. I said she was a good leader because she was respected on and off the field, and then she was always led by example, and everybody just respected her. And with respect goes a long way when it comes to it. If you don't respect them, then you're not going to get respect back. And then leadership role that I've taken is I've been like a coach for other soccer teams, like a younger girl. So just like leading by example and stuff. And so I can help do certain things.
So I think my dad was kind of just like, I guess usually like the man of the house, kind of just kind of what he says, and it's kind of a good thing because we know he has our back at the end of it too. Personally, I was the leader of my high school baseball team, which I wasn't really a fan of. So I'm not really one to kind of like talk too much. Sure. So like when I was kind of on the spot, I was never really sure what to say. Like some people like literally like do a halftime speech. That's something I wasn't really good at, so I didn't like it. But yeah, I wasn't really a fan of the leadership role. Hey,
Yeah. And he ran a special manufacturing plant for a very long time. Sort of working with very expensive high school workers for the state. So he sort of choose the leadership in that. He didn't overdelegate, he never overdelegated. Obviously, he's not specialized making those as builders and things like that. But obviously, I think he very much encouraging on it. Obviously, he showed up to work every day, so he's not skipping on what he's supposed to be doing. And he was a very encouraging and hardworking at his job. And all of his coworkers, all of his employees are like.
Yeah.
And then as for myself, I've been in leadership positions, I don't really like them very much. Because
Sure.
It's very difficult to keep people in check. And everyone just kind of roam around wild and we don't get. You sort of don't you keep more than. And I find I don't have to do that.
I appreciate you all going around and sharing. I did this for a few different reasons. First of all, a lot of you are still in a leadership or management role with a group. So if you were listening and there was somebody who's involved in a group and you're interested in learning more, or even doing that for your group observation, I encourage you to reach out. But I did want to observe the general trends, the things that I noticed from what you all really looked for in leaders and what you all have experienced being leaders yourselves. One of the biggest things that I noticed is a lot of you have had a transition between being a follower in a group or moving into a leader, right? Like being a high school competitor of something and then turning and being a coach or an alum of that same activity. And that's a unique challenge because on the one end, it's great to have some of the peers and people you've worked with before, but there's also a little bit of a learning curve now that they look up to you. It feels nice to have a lot of the experience fresh in your head from when you competed, which is something that an older coach might not have, but it can also be challenging to figure out how you take the skills that you had as a competitor and translate that into more of a leadership or management style role. A lot of you also mentioned that you're not necessarily the biggest fans of being leaders, right? That oftentimes the pressure, the amount you have to talk, the amount that you have to wrangle, personalities can be a challenge. And so it definitely puts a spotlight under us because a lot of you mentioned that good leaders are not just people who understand the issues, but are people who are able to lead by example, who are able to kind of embody the qualities and skills that we would look for, right? We don't want leaders who would tell us to do things and then not enact them themselves. I had somebody last class who mentioned having a coach for track who will run laps with them as they're running. So having somebody who's being involved, who's participating in the way that we are, who's communicating well, who's being honest and available and accessible, are all things that we see as really important, right? So I think it's really clear to us who good leaders are, what good leaders do, but we don't always feel thrilled about having to take on those responsibilities because we know there's a lot that goes into that and that can be challenging. So I think the points that you all raised do a good job here of helping us to map out some of the key ideas about leadership, right? Leadership generally refers to people who are dealing with a crisis or challenge and are able to develop a plan of action, right? They're able to do something that effectively resolves the issue, helps the group move forward. For example, do you have an upcoming game or competition, right? And the leader is trying to facilitate and make sure that the team is working successfully. Or maybe you have a manager or supervisor who is trying to make sure a work project is being completed on time and the group members are able to get it done, right? In this case, the leader is the person who recognizes there's a problem and helps make sure that people in the group are able to figure out a solution to that problem. Okay? So leaders are also thinking about the context of the situation, right? Leaders are adapting to the resources and the situation as it comes up. For example, if you're involved in competition, there's a good chance that coach or leader is somebody who knows and is gaining intel about who you're competing against and devising a strategy that makes sense for what you're dealing with. Or perhaps a leader is contending with a group professionally where a lot of people are not consistently participating or doing their job and has to modify the expectations of the group with that in mind, right? Example I always think about when I think about leaders managing crisis, you've seen the show Scandal, right? Olivia Pope and that character. It's all about handling like various problems and issues that come up in a professional context. Leaders are people who we look to for guidance, people who generally have the characteristics, have the traits, have the behavior that we would like. They're people that are available as a resource to support us, to help us as we're dealing with challenges. We're available to talk. And there's been a whole nature versus nurture debate about leadership, right? In one camp are people who feel like leadership and leadership skills are things that come on the basis of our personality. That some people are natural born leaders, are more charismatic, are more outgoing, are more able to take on those responsibilities. And other people believe that leaders leaders and leadership skills are things that nobody has on face, but develop over time, okay? And generally speaking, studies suggest that the latter is more often true. That somebody can be really charismatic, they can be outgoing, they can be friendly. That doesn't mean that they're a good leader, right? Because leadership means taking those skills and translating them into effective teamwork, organization, and management. And that doesn't always happen. In the same way, some people might hate putting themselves out there, are more quiet, withdrawn, not a big fan of having the spotlight under them, but can take on the skills that they need in order to lead effectively, especially if they feel like they're the only people that can do the job. So leadership is a set of skills. It's not something that's hard-coded in us. Everybody can be a leader if we're making the effort to develop the skill set and the understanding that we need in order to do that effectively. We might have traits and patterns that make us more or less able to do that easily, but it is a skill that we can all develop over time. Some key ideas here of leadership that really connected well to the things that you all shared can be broken down into a few different areas. One of them is that they're self-aware, right? That they recognize that they're a part of the group and that how they behave in a group matters. So if they say, it's really important that we all practice and they don't do any practice themselves, it's going to be harder to take that leader at their word, right? You might be familiar with the phrase, do as I say, not as I do. And we oftentimes look to how leaders behave and mirror that rather than mirroring what the leaders say, because we see their actions as a lot more credible. Internalized moral perspectives, right? Somebody has a moral compass. They're ultimately going to do the right thing or act in an ethical way, right? We had a leader who was trying to pick a team captain or leader for the group. We wouldn't want them to arbitrarily pick their personal favorite person or the person that gave them cookies, right? We would want to make sure that they chose the team captain ethically and felt like they explained their reasoning, their process, and why they chose who they did. They also have balanced processing. In other words, they take in and they judge information. I have a lot of RAs in classes like conflict management when I teach that class. And I have a lot of people that I talk to in that capacity who navigate the challenge of dealing with people in dorms who might have competing claims, like a noise issue or problem that came up, and they're having to weigh and judge the competing arguments and come to a conclusion that moves everybody forward. So the ability to deal with conflict, to move forward and judge information in a clear way is an important skill. And then lastly is relational transparency, right? While we have differences in the idea of power distance, some people might choose to more openly speak to and democratically engage with the leader. Other people, you don't cross the leader, right? You don't question them. In any case, it's important that those roles are defined, that a leader is creating an understanding about what their role is, how they're being involved in the group, how other people and their positions relate to the group, and so on, right? Being clear about how the group is structured and how people behave in that group is really important. So key idea here is this idea of deck leadership. And this actually comes from, if you think about naval ship context, we think about how a leader in a group is effectively exhibiting deck leadership. They are on the deck of the ship, right? In other words, they're not somebody that's just like in the quarters, not doing anything, but they're out there, they're observing, they're participating. Perhaps, they're raising the sails, they're helping to steer the ship, right? They're helping to manage different parts of the ship, see what's going on the ship, and be able to adapt to issues that might be coming up, right? So in other words, they are interacting and learning what the challenges, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and so on are, right? I'm a big fan of Star Trek. You have the captain, right, who's on the ship and in the main area. So they get all of the different people who are in charge of things like managing the technology, the signals, and communication, right? They're there and interacting with all of those other roles. So in this way, we learn the opportunities, strengths, and weaknesses. A deck leader is somebody who's helping to steer the ship, and they recognize, oh, wow, the wheel is really creaky, or raising the sails is challenging. There's maybe a rip in one of the sails, right? They are being involved, and through their involvement, allow other people in the group to feel included. In other words, they're not detached or laissez-faire. They're involved in the process as a leader. They are a track coach who is running with everybody else. So when it comes to leadership, there's a few different things that we can consider here. One of them refers to traits. We can also think about situation or context. We can think about functional leadership, and we can think about transformative leadership. I want to take some time to talk about those. And don't worry about getting everything down word to word, since the slides are available for you to review. So you all mentioned a lot of traits that we look to that make for good leaders. And studies have helped us to understand what we can consider to be universal traits of good leadership. One of them is that they have an orientation toward achievement. They get stuff done, right? They are people who help to make sure the group project is complete. They help people to succeed and win games, or lose on a good note, right? People who are able to do well and allow the things to be delivered that need to happen. Good leaders are adaptable. They're able to adjust to changing situations and circumstances. You might think back to the who moved my cheese example, right? Cheese moves in the maze, people adapt and adjust to the new location. They have good energy. They're enthusiastic. They're interested. They bring a desire to be there that permeates throughout the group. They're intelligent, right? They understand and have the knowledge that allows them to deal with the issue. So you're not going to hire somebody as a coach who has zero experience, right? Or perhaps they have other skills that help them to grow into the role. So if you're a fan of the show Ted Lasso, right, there's a character who doesn't come in with the same direct experience, but has other skills and emotional intelligence that help him to adapt to that role. They're innovative, right? They're coming up with new solutions, with ideas that are outside of the box and are adjusting to changing circumstances. Perhaps they have an idea for a particular gambit or rule that somebody can do if they are losing at a game that'll help them turn things around. They're persistent. They stick with things even as the going gets tough and even as other people might give up. Taking responsibility is important. Sometimes they mess up and they get something wrong, and being able to be accountable about that is important. They have confidence, right? And a lot of times a leader is terrified, but it's a fake it until you make it scenario where they project that confidence to the group and try to present that. They're sociable, right? They're able to communicate and relate to other people. They talk, they use communication as a tool to connect, and they have good verbal communication. They're saying what's on their mind. They're allowing the group to move forward. They're communicating in a way that's clear and gets their main ideas forward. There are a lot of ways that they can organize and host, such as using an agenda that convey verbal communication well. We also have what's known as situational or context-based leadership, right? In other words, depending upon the situation, we might have leaders who step up for a particular scenario. For example, right, if you're noticing that somebody is choking, right, and they're in need of CPR, they're not able to breathe, you might step up and you might have training, and you come in and you help perform CPR on that person. In that moment, you have become a situational or context-based leader. You are the person who's stepping into that role to get something done. When I coached at the University of Utah, one of the things we did whenever we traveled to debate tournaments was we would make sure that all students and coaches were qualified to drive our team vans. And the reason we did that is we had long trips and we needed to cycle out people, or somebody was incapacitated. We would be able to have anybody at any moment who would be willing to drive and take things on. So that was an important way we utilize context-based leadership too. Situational leaders can adapt one of 4 different styles, right? In a situation, they might tell people what to do and how to do it. So perhaps you were in a car accident and you chose to call a close family member or friend who walks you through all the steps that you need to do to get out of that situation. Somebody could also sell or try to get the compliance of people in the group. For example, hey, I ordered these new jerseys for our team that I'd like you to wear. Aren't they great? They have these zippers and they have these hoodies. Aren't they so nice, right? Participating involves a situational leader who is focusing on the relationships. Again, think about it like deck leadership, being on the ship, taking on the different roles with other people in the group, and delegating, right? A situational leader who focuses more on dividing up responsibilities. Maybe you realize that you need to plan for a party while somebody's out, right? And you're focusing on getting people to do certain things, right? Or started watching a silly like home renovation show on Netflix. The premise is that you have a family who's out for 12 hours. And that 12 hours, they have to renovate the person's home so they're surprised when they come back. And there's a lot of delegating that goes on in a lot of these kind of home improvement shows where people are going off and this person's working on the kitchen, this person's working on the yard, right? So getting people to do different things is oftentimes a situational leadership strategy. We also have to think about maturity in leadership, right? It moves through 4 different levels over time as we become involved in groups. At the first level, we're not very confident. We don't feel like we're able to take on a leadership role. We don't know enough or have the resources that we need. At level 2, we have some skills, but not all of them, right? We're able to start to understand what a leader needs to do, but we don't feel like we can take on that role. At level 3, you could think about this as somebody who's like shadowing or kind of being like an assistant manager type of role. They're able to perform the basic tasks, but they do need some extra help in making sure that that can be done in the way that they need it. And then at the 4th stage, level 4 maturity, somebody is fully able to complete and execute the tasks that they need as leader, right? The idea being that as we find ourselves involved in groups over time, that we're moving between those levels of maturity. We also have the idea of a functional leader. A functional leader is about trying to achieve a goal or a function of the group, right? So generally speaking, a functional leader does a few different things. What is the situation? You know, maybe they need to get a report on the desk by Friday. They understand what the task is. They got to get it on the desk, right? They have to get this completed by that time. They have to develop a plan, like having a meeting, having a work session, dividing up what people need to do. They get that done. They figure out the amount of time and resources that are needed. So in order to get this proposal forward, we have to make sure that we are meeting this milestone by this date, this milestone by this date. You're allocating the time and resources, you're reevaluating. So maybe you realize that this task takes on way more time than you thought it would, and you really need an extension on that. So you might provide a change to plans to make sure you can get it done. Another thing to think about here is quality standards and control. How are you making sure that what your group is putting together is good, right? Whether it's competing well, whether it's getting a project that's written or developed well, like that stage is really important. And then sharing and evaluating the outcomes. What happened? What was your group able to do, and how can you speak to that experience, right? Whenever I ask you to share a group activity, that's an example of sharing and evaluating the outcomes at the end. Or if you're ever involved in a competition or activity, oftentimes you'll have a press release, right, where it's circulated as to what it is that you achieved and did. And oftentimes those are very specifically written in a way that highlights the achievements of the group. And lastly, we have a transformative leader, right? So a transformative leader is not just about making sure that people are getting things done, but this is somebody who is really helping us to be motivated, is thinking about the vision, the mission, is motivating and getting us to accomplish the tasks in a really meaningful and powerful way, right? We think of a lot of silly examples like of motivational speakers and people giving a pep talk, but also leading by example might mean that there's somebody that we want to be like, who carries the same passion, the expertise, the focus, the skills that we do. Maybe you're really into weight training and you like to watch like some of the competitions where people lift really, really heavy weights, right? That would be an example here of how somebody might be in that more transformative capacity or role, right? Or perhaps somebody that you look up to, a celebrity, a famous figure, embodies the kinds of traits that you find yourself interested in too, right? So some of these things include intellectual stimulation. Are they getting you interested in thinking about the issue? Are they thinking about you? Are they giving you coaching support in a one-on-one way? Are they inspiring and creating a positive influence on you in the group? Those are important skills that a transformative leader can bring to the table. That is not just helping people get something done, but it's changing the way that people think about an issue. So it can really move them in a positive direction. So what I'd like you to do in the remaining time that we have here is thinking about these 3 different leadership styles that we talked about. Which best describes the leader that you selected for the first part of your part? So would you say they're more a situational or context-based leader, they a functional leader, or a transformative leader? So I'd like you to identify where you feel like they fit into and perhaps explain a little bit as to why you put them in that particular category. So as you're wrapping up, we took some time today to talk about leadership, some of the key goals and purpose of being a leader, some of the ways that leaders might choose to communicate, and how a leader is able to achieve some of the goals of the group. So next class, we'll talk a little bit more about how leaders engage with members and people in the group and some of the strategies for doing so. When you've completed, please email or pass forward your attendance activity for the day. Start to think about a group that you might be interested in observing for your last assignment in the class. And I will see you again on Wednesday.